We're here at the Sea House in downtown Chicago, where Lucas Henning is our wine director. We're also here with Fred Scherrer, and he's going to be talking about some of his wines and some questions that are often asked from some of my students. With regards to California, how important are California vintages for the average consumer? When they go to the store, should they be paying close attention to what year the wine was made?
It's the lack of high vintage variation in California is a blessing and a curse. So I'm not sure whether I pay that much attention to it. Honestly, I look at producers. Some producers are going to be more vintage sensitive. There are vintages that large producers might have a difficult time with having it conform to their systems, whereas maybe faster moving vintners are able to deal with slight variations on the vintage. There are parts of the world where the vintages can be extremely challenging, either due to lack of ripeness or suddenly hyper ripeness in an area where there's no tradition of dealing with super ripe grapes. So then various vintners can fail.
Like the 2003 vintage over in Europe.
In some places, there are some vintners that just
didn't know what to do.
Equipped to do it, or in some in Oregon as well. And there were others that were very good at dealing with it. And you take the flip side, Germany in 2000 was a very difficult vintage, and there were vintners who did a fantastic job. I would look for those wines from those houses because I wanted to reward these guys for the effort they had to go through to make such good wine.
Right.
So it's a difficult thing, and it's kind of a pet peeve of mine is to get too vintage sensitive and look more to houses and.
So if you have a good producer, they're going to do all that they can, even in a bad year, to produce a good wine.
Yeah, and what defines a bad year? Different things can. Either rain at the wrong times, underripe type conditions, moldy challenges to grapes. So that sorting. There's different ways to deal with the challenges. It can make it, I guess, a bad vintage for a given producer. But I really hate to call it bad globally, or at least for a whole region, because there's always somebody who does really well. And you get a challenging vintage, and there's no reward for going to heroics.
Right.
It breaks my heart.
Yeah, it's easy. I shouldn't say easy, but it's easier to produce a good wine in a good vintage. But to produce a good wine in a bad vintage.
Sure, you get an easy vintage or good/easy vintage, then maybe some of the less expensive wines, that from vineyard sites that maybe don't have a real fancy reputation, you're going to get some really tasty stuff out of it. So, from a consumer standpoint, I think that would be easier to go right. And then in tougher vintages, you have to be a little more choosy, perhaps.
Right.
But not to avoid the vintage altogether. I think that's where being able to taste something yourself, or have a reliable critical source, somebody that you either aligned with or absolutely totally opposite of. You can use that person or that review, that critic as a bellwether of what you should be interested in.
Right.